No, jestem. Okej. Dobra, dobra. It's good, it's good. Dobra, muszę jeszcze poogarniać trochę, ale... Okej, są jakieś trudności z połączeniem tutaj trochę. Patrzę. Okej. No. Jak ja uwielbiam, kiedy to... No tutaj łapię, ale chyba mam za wysoki bitrate ustawiony ogólnie. Takie mam trochę wrażenie. Zmniejszmy go trochę. Może będzie lepiej trochę z tym. Dobra, co jest nie tak? Teraz potrzeba ogarnąć. Czy zmniejszenie bitrate'u pomogło trochę? Mam trochę wrażenie, że tak. Okej. No, chyba jest lepiej niż było. Dobra. No. Czy teraz wszystko działa? W teorii powinno. Tak. Ściągnę sobie tutaj. Zapomniałem naładować sobie telefonu, żeby używać jego jako czatu. Więc to jeszcze muszę ogarnąć, ale spoko. Dobra. To od razu mówię. Sytuacja wygląda w ten sposób, że w ogóle sobie nie powtórzyłem tego, co robiłem na ostatnim tym streamie. W sensie, mam na myśli programowania. Nie zrobiłem sobie powtórki, a powinienem był. Jak za każdym razem w sumie. Więc dzisiaj trochę będę szedł dalej na zasadzie takiej, no to trochę za bardzo do przodu, ale robię co trzeba, tak. Wczoraj sobie odpuściłem streama, bo byłem w tragicznej kondycji. Sekundę. No, wczoraj byłem w niewystarczająco dobrej kondycji, żeby zrobić streama. Więc no dzisiaj dorobię. Możliwe, że dzisiaj będzie krócej po prostu, z racji właśnie tego, że sobie nie powtórzyłem jak należy. Tu też jest opcja na to. No. Otwieram sobie Godota. Otwieram sobie RPG. Bo będziemy to kontynuować, co robiliśmy ostatnio. O, dobra. Kurna, żebym przynajmniej miał telefon naładowany jak należy. Ale nie, bądźmy warzywami. Mogę przyciągnąć tutaj? O, może... Oczywiście, że nie pójdzie po mojej myśli. O, matko. No nic. I coś. Okej. Aha. Dobra. To muzyczka jedzie w odstawkę. I przechodzimy do oglądania kolejnego odcinka i robienia dalej. W sumie kopiowania tego, co będzie robione w odcinku. O, matko. Okej. Jeszcze tylko szybką rundkę tutaj zrobię. Aha. Na YouTubie są jakieś problemy z transmisją, tak? A nie. Technicznie działa. Okej. Okej, to lecimy.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Benjamin, and welcome to our Godot Action RPG series. This will be our part 3, and in this video, we're going to be talking about collisions and addressing a few of the comments that you guys gave me in the previous video. So let's come into our player here. One of the things that you guys brought up, and this was a silly mistake on my part, to be honest, we actually have delta inside of our clamped function right here, which means we're multiplying our max speed by delta right here. So if delta changes, then this is going to change. We're basically clamping it too soon, right? Delta needs to be on the outside of this, right? And so we could put this right on the outside right here. And this is one step better, but this has still got some problems. And it's because we're applying delta to our velocity, right? But then we're actually manipulating our velocity again later. And so that's a problem right there, because it's not going to be, this velocity is not going to be quite accurate because we've applied delta beforehand. So the easiest thing to do here is just...
Zapierdziel to jest przyspieszenie, okej. Myślę, że zmienię nazwę zapierdzielu na... A? Okej. Po prostu na przyspieszenie zmienię nazwę. Tak. Ale... A, tylko deracza robiliśmy. Jo, tylko to robiliśmy, okej. Okej. No problem. No problem.
Just apply delta at the very end to our velocity. And then, of course, we need to apply delta to our acceleration and our friction, but we can apply it at the very end. And one of you also suggested using move toward instead of course, accurate because we've applied delta beforehand.
Dobra.
So the easiest thing to do here is just apply delta at the very end to our velocity.
Okay.
And then, of course, we need to apply delta to our acceleration and our friction, but we can apply it at the very end. And one of you also suggested using move toward instead of this right here. So we could say velocity equals velocity dot move toward, and then we want to give it the value that we're moving towards, right? And this would be toward instead of this right here. So we could say velocity equals velocity dot move toward, and then we want to give it the value that we're moving towards, right? And this would be our input vector times our max speed, I think, if I'm thinking about this right. So we take our input vector, multiply that by our max speed. That's the value we want to move towards. And then the amount that we would move towards that would be our acceleration times delta. Very similar to our friction right here. And this is a lot cleaner, and it should work the same.
Okej, dobra, teraz co? Velocity, tak, jest równe z velocity dot move toward. Dobra, muszę jeszcze raz sobie przeczytać to. Move toward moves from by the delta value using okej. A, taki wód. I dobra. Nie jestem pewien, czy dobrze to rozumiem, ale chyba
Theoretically.
będę chciał jeszcze raz jego na pewno. A. Kierunek inputu. Tak. Mnożymy razy match speed. Czyli to rozumiem. I przyspieszenie. Mnożymy razy deltę. I... dobra. Już zaczynam łapać. Mhm. Bo tutaj to właśnie chodziło o to, żeby przy inpucie, czyli w momencie, kiedy się porusza postać, że kierunek był razem z tym, z maksymalną, ale musi być ograniczenie przyspieszenia. Okej. Znaczy, chaotycznie to opisuję, ale wiem, co chcę powiedzieć, ale nie mam słów, żeby to opisać. Będę musiał jeszcze sobie, tak jak mówiłem wcześniej, powtórzyć poprzedni odcinek, tak czy inaczej prywatnie, poprzednie może nawet oba. Raczej tylko jeden. I ten. I wtedy na spokojnie właśnie jeszcze raz to przeanalizować, ale wydaje mi się, że rozumiem zastosowanie,
If I've done my job
podejście
right.
tutaj.
And yes, we'll allow access. That's an
O matko, ale porusza się wolniej niż się poruszał. Dużo wolniej. Dobra, zobaczymy. Okej, może nawet zbyt wysokie tarcie, ale to już mniejsza. Match speed może dać 240. Okej. Przyspieszenie dam 120, a masz 360. Powinno teraz być. Wait, what? What? Michał Michalski, witaj wśród subskrybujących. Okej. Zaskakuje mnie. Mam inaczej inną głośność ustawioną na subskrypcję na YouTubie. Dalej nie rozumiem, jakim cudem działają te subskrypcje na YouTubie. W sensie dalej nie przypominam sobie, żebym je podłączał do alertów. Tajemnice się powielają.
Another thing I should mention here, I've updated my version. I'm now running Godot 3.2.1 stable. Just so you know, I did update to that new version. And so we're getting a really slow acceleration here.
Nie, to nie był plan. Sprawdzić, czy wszystkie te... Sprawdzić wszystkie czaty. Okay, it's read. It's good.
Or a very slow max speed. So somewhere along the line, we've changed it, right? If our max speed is 100, our acceleration times delta, velocity equals move towards.
Na 10
it seems to be working how I would expect it everywhere else. Like it seemed that I was moving properly and stuff. So let's try printing our velocity here.
A nie, dobra.
and see exactly what's happening. So we're very slowly approaching. We're still increasing. Our max speed is still increasing. And there we go. We capped at 100. And then we slow back down again. So here we're moving towards this max speed. Aha. Yeah.
A nie, nie mogę
So I
tego zrobić,
see
co
what's
pomyślałem
going
mniejsze.
on here. Because we're applying delta afterwards, right, to this max speed, our max speed is still 100. That's the value that we're approaching. And then we're applying delta to it afterwards. And so what we get here is a problem where our acceleration is way too slow for this max speed of 100. And even though in the end it's going to end up moving slower, it still takes us forever to approach that maximum speed that then gets brought down. So let's just try upping our acceleration here. I want to just see what this does. And there we go. We can now hit that max speed significantly faster. And I don't even know what this max speed is going to be like. And wow, our friction is way slow again, of course, because we haven't done anything with that.
Szczerze mówiąc, to mnie trochę wręcz
So here we go. Now we've got our movement back, similar to how it was.
Jeszcze raz. To tłumaczy, dlaczego on miał tak niskie te liczby tam. Aha, dobra.
Was before.
Zobaczmy, czy będzie usuwał deltę, czy...
But you can see this does make things a little bit confusing because our friction and our acceleration look much larger than our max speed, even though in the end we're multiplying our velocity by delta to make sure that that's fine. It is a little bit awkward, and that's something that I've run into, but we're not going to get into that too much for now. We're going to leave it about like this because this feels pretty good for a movement. It might be a little bit fast.
Dobra, no to robimy tak jak było tam. Znaczy wcześniej. No tak zrobię. What the... Aha. Fajne jest to, że się ślizga w momencie, kiedy zmieniam po prostu kierunek poruszania się. Ale kiedy puszczam, to zatrzymuje się od razu. Przez wysoki właśnie współczynnik. Przez dużą wartość
I think maybe I'll try 80
tarcia.
and see. You want your character to be able to move around on a screen pretty quick. And 80 feels pretty good around on a screen.
No. Okay.
Pretty quick. And 80 feels pretty good. So we'll use these values, but that solves the problem that we had before. The last thing that you guys commented that was really helpful is that there's an argument to be made for not using delta. There's an argument to be made that if your game does slow down, you want to just have the game to slow down and to show that frame drop and have the character move slower and not be tied to the time, to seconds, to time in the real world. And the argument there is that it can be more fair to the player. If there's lagging or something, then they're going to be able to react better to that lag and deal with it properly. So there's two sides of the argument there. I'm going to continue using delta throughout this because I feel like for this game, it will be fine. We're not going to end up with a lot of situations where the game is going to lag down significantly. So we'll continue using delta.
Sweet, sweet summer child. Jak się postarasz, to można wszystko sprawić, żeby lagowało. Matko święta, co tutaj odtenterowuje się? Okej. Okej. Już łapię, co się odtenterowało. Mniejsza. Nie ma to jak sprawdzać co chwilę czaty. Wszystkie. Aha. Oż ty. No od... Matuniu święta. Świra można dostać momentami, tak patrzę na to wszystko. Oż ty. Okej, będzie git. W końcu. Załapało, co powinno było załapać. Przynajmniej na tej części.
I think this will be best for this game, but there is an argument to be had for that, and you might consider that, you know, that's something to consider when you're working on your game. So now let's get right into collisions, because that's what we're going to be doing in this, is setting up some collisions. And
kolizje to by było w dużej mierze na tym etapie, w sensie na tym poziomie tak naprawdę, nie, w sumie tutaj, przez inspektor i tutaj kolizję tak naprawdę to
we might actually discuss some,
na tym
we'll see.
poziomie
Yeah,
się
let's
to
just do
zmienia.
collisions for now. So our player character right here is set up as a kinematic body, and we've attached a sprite to this, but this kinematic body doesn't have any sort of collisions yet. So we're going to attach a collider to this kinematic
no
body,
tak.
and you can see we've actually got this warning over here saying that it needs some sort of a collider attached to it, or else it can't actually interact with other things. So we're going to start by clicking on our player and clicking the little plus button, and we'll search for a collision shape 2D. We'll just pick this right here. For the collision shape for our player, I have decided to use a capsule shape. And oops, actually, did I use a capsule shape? I hid my other collider. Yeah, I did. Okay. And this will just make it so that our character can more easily move around corners and stuff. If we run into the corner of a wall, we'll be able to slide around that a little bit. It'll be more forgiving when the player is moving around in our world. So if we come over here, if you have your collision shape selected, and you come over here into the properties, we can select new capsule shape, and we'll want to shrink this down. And let's actually come into our snap options up here and turn on use pixel snap. It's probably off because I didn't have it quite set up right. And we will, oops, accidentally grab the player here. If you want to select, for example, the collision shape here and move it without grabbing the player, what you can do is you can hold the Alt key, you can select it first and then hold the Alt key, and that will allow you to move it by itself.
Oh, okay. Oops. Okay. Oh, that is nice, moim zdaniem. That is moim zdaniem nice. Tego się będę trzymał.
We'll set it about here, and we're actually going to rotate it as well. We'll set its rotation to -90. So I just came into the transform and set the rotation, and that moves it to be more like this.
Bo on chce...
Again.
Dobra, jestem warzywem. Bo on pomyślał o tym kompletnie w innych standardach niż ja. Że tak naprawdę tak jakby tylko jego cień wchodzi w tą interakcję. Tylko tak naprawdę okolice jego nóg, żeby głowa mogła nachodzić na różne
Move it down just a
warstwy.
bit. Shrink this down a little bit more. You can set it up how you want. We don't want the collision to come up here because later when we deal with depth and making sure that this can walk behind and in front of things, we'll want our collision for movement to be very different from what our collision for taking a hit looks like. Once we get our hitboxes and hurtboxes set up, we'll be setting up a different collider that encompasses more of the player character here for that. So let's save this like this.
A w sumie też dobrze zrobił, nie pomyślałem o tym. Nogi. Skupić się na tym, żeby w sumie tak, o. Teraz
That
będzie
looks good enough.
satysfakcjonująco dosyć.
And let's add in a new node here so that we can test these collisions. So we'll come up to world, we'll add a new node, and we'll do a static body 2D. And like I think I mentioned this in the very first video, but a static body 2D is used for creating some sort of a wall or static object in your world that can be collided with but won't be moved. It's going to be static. Once we've created that static body 2D, you can see it's up here just in the corner, we can attach a collision shape to it as well. And this time we'll do a collision polygon 2D. And when you have a collision polygon 2D,
Jeszcze raz, co on dodał?
collision polygon
Polygon. A, okej.
2D. And when you have a collision polygon 2D attached like this, if you select it, you'll notice up here that we get some new options right there. And we're actually going to turn on snap here. Just click this little icon right here to turn on snap. We can use these options right here to create a collision shape. We can just kind of draw it out actually. So we'll click this little create points icon. We'll create a point here, here, and just kind of draw some shapes out, okay? Anything you want. And come all the way back around and come back to the starting point. Now, sometimes when you do this, sometimes when you create this collision shape like this in the collision polygon, I've had times where when I come all the way back around, it doesn't fill it in. You should see it fill it in like this. If it doesn't fill it in, you'll need to right click and try again. Because that means it didn't quite work right. And that's happened to me a few times. I don't know exactly why, but usually if I just do it again, then it fixes it. Now we've got this set up. If we run our game, you can see we can move and we can actually collide with these, but it's not properly, you can't see it, right? We can't see the collision shape. So what we'll do for now is just come into debug and click visible collision shapes, and you can.
Okay. Okay.
See, there's some other debug options here, but visible collision shape should be good for now. Now when we run the game, we can see the collision shape for our character and the collision shape for the wall.
Wiecie co? Ten kształt jest jednak trochę zbyt podejrzany. O matko, fajne te można robić z tego. Labirynt z tego można fajny zrobić. Można wykorzystać to. A. Okej, ciekawe. Ciekawe przyspieszenie wychodzi. Matko, czy to mnie tam pisze? Właśnie się dowiedziałem czegoś. Tak jakby interesującego.
Walls. But you'll notice we kind of stick to these walls a little bit. If we move into them, it feels kind of like they're sticky. We have a hard time getting away from them. And that is because of the function that we're using for our character's movement. We are using move and collide right here. Move and collide handles movement and collisions for us. If you notice, we didn't have to write any collision code. It just automatically worked for us once we put our colliders on, right? That's wonderful. But the problem is that it doesn't slide along those walls. And there's a couple different solutions for this. If you come into the help file and look up move and collide right here in our kinematic body, you'll see that there's another function right under it called move and slide.
A. To wystarczy. Cały czas zapominam. Aha, znowu ten. Znowu trochę. To wymaga chyba trochę większych zmian, bo znowu prędkość się zmieniła. Dobra. Co tutaj? Się odtemperowuje. Dobra. Działa, chyba działa. Dobra.
And so this function right here can handle sliding along an edge as well. And it comes with some other properties that you can pass into it if you're making like a platform game or something. But since we're kind of making more of like a 2.5D perspective, we don't need to worry about a lot of those other optional arguments.
A ja usunę po prostu deltę. Tutaj. No to rusza się już normalnie, jeżeli chodzi o prędkość. Okej. No nie chcę się czasami odkleić od ścian za to.
Arguments that you can pass in. So we could just switch this right here to move and slide and run the game. There's going to be a problem though. And holy cow, we're moving way slower now, right? That's not good. Why are we moving so much slower? Well, come back here and look at move and slide. You can see that for move and slide, if we come down to here, it says the linear velocity, this is the argument that we're passing in, right? It says, is the velocity vector in pixels per second. Unlike move and collide, you should not multiply it.
Czyli dobrze że usuwałem deltę. Chciałem tylko przetestować w sumie. A, w takim razie nie trzeba ograniczać tego do delty w tym miejscu. Okay.
It by delta. The physics engine handles applying the velocity. So if we come back into our player right here and we say we can now remove the multiply by delta. And that's because move and slide will handle the delta for us inside of the function. So we don't have to do it outside. We still have to have delta applied to our other areas, but we don't have to have it applied there. You can see now it's a lot smoother. We don't stick to these walls like we used to before.
Jest inny trochę
We
problem.
slide along them. In the corner here, we get a little bit of weirdness going on.
Nie chcę się odkleić. Jeżeli
Right
wcześniej
here.
zacznę się poruszać.
And one of the things that I generally do with the move and slide function is it actually has a return value. And if you guys come into your warning messages right here, so let's talk about warnings for a bit in Godot. Godot will give you warnings. They're not
Okej, chwila. Patrzę, sprawdzam czat.
necessarily game-breaking bugs. It's not going to break your game. However, these warnings will often tell you about potential issues you might be having. So this warning, for example, says
Tutaj. Slide, what is used with
the function move and slide returns a value, but this value is never used. So they're saying this function returns some sort of value, but it's not being used currently. So if we come back into our kinematic body, we see that move and slide returns a vector 2. Okay, so what does that mean? Let's come down and read. It says returns the linear velocity vector.
Zwraca to, że doszło do właśnie tego, że doszło do kolizji i zmienia się kierunek, jeżeli dobrze rozumiem. Po to, żeby móc się po prostu
Rotated and or scaled if a
zatrzymać
slide collision
ewentualnie. Tak.
occurred. To get detailed information about collisions that occur, get slide collision. So this is if we need to get more information out of the function. But for now, it's just saying this returns a linear velocity. So that means we're passing in a linear velocity. And then this says, oh, your velocity, this should be your updated velocity after the collisions. So in order to get that information, we just say velocity equals move and slide. So now this function returns some sort of velocity after a collision, and we set that to be our new velocity. And that right there will allow us to remember the velocity that we had before the collision and properly handle that, which seems to fix the issues we were having in these corners. You can see, and we also kind of keep our momentum around corners. We'll kind of slide up the new edge.
Okay.
And that's because we're getting that information from the function. It's saying, oh, look, you got this. You had a collision, and this is the velocity that was left over from the collision. And now set that to be our new velocity. So there you go. And that talks about warnings as well. If you see, we've got another warning right here. Font oversampling only works with the resize modes, keep width, keep height, and expand. So I'm assuming that that means when we start using fonts, if the fonts may start having issues unless we use, if we come into our project settings and our window, unless we use the aspect ratio here, we might want to set this to keep. I wonder if that would do it, or if we need to set it to one of those keep width, keep height. Setting it to keep seems to have fixed that. And usually keep is what I
Okej, to było ustawienie projektu. Display, right? Nope. Jest. Dobra, muszę jeszcze raz zobaczyć, w którym miejscu te display. No tak. Keep. No. Okay.
might want to set this to keep. I wonder if that would do it, or if we need to set it to one of those keep width, keep height. Setting it to keep seems to have fixed that. And usually keep is what I like to do. That way it just keeps either the width or the height depending on which one fits better. And that will just add black bars to the screen if the aspect ratio of the monitor or the phone or whatever doesn't quite fit our 16:9 aspect ratio of the game. So that's going to be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching it. I
Okay.
hope you enjoyed it. Once again, let's continue this discussion. If you guys have feedback
To
for me or
wprowadził
comments, leave them
poprawki
in
małe i...
the comment section and I will get to them. I've been answering and reading every single comment. Your comment may end up helping with somebody else or in good morning.
Okej, trochę mnie to tak zaskoczyło, że to tak szybko poszło. W sensie, no, 47 minut tylko. Spodziewałem się znacznie dłuższego tego, a że znacznie wolniej mi to pójdzie dzisiaj. Ale no, odcinek tutorialowy był mega krótki dzisiaj. Okej. Matko, jutro po zlecanku muszę usiąść do tego. Dobra.
Morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Benjamin, and welcome to the Godot Action RPG series. This will be video 4 or part 4 in the series. And in this video, we're going to be learning about creating scenes for our different objects inside of our main scene here, inside of our world scene, and potentially a few other things. We'll see how things go. So in the last video, we learned about collision shapes like this.
Matko, naszła mnie teraz straszna ochota, żeby przerwać streama, tylko po to, żeby usiąść do pracy nad Risk of Rainem. Ja pierdzielę. Co jest nie tak z moim mózgiem? Nie rozumiem. Dobra.
And setting up some collisions for our character. So here's the problem that comes up, okay? So let's say you have this level right here and you've got your character in this level.
Już chwila. A już wiem, dobra, mniejsza. To chciałem
And you create
przemyśleć.
another level, so let's create a new scene. We'll just click the little plus button up here.
Tu, okej.
And you create another level, so let's create a new scene. We'll just click the little plus button up here and do a new 2D scene. And we'll call this level 2. This is just an example, right? And so we create this other level and we're like, okay, well, we want to put, well, we won't save it. Don't need to save it. But we're like, well, we want to put our player character in this level. And well, let's see, we have to create a kinematic body 2D, right? So kinematic body 2D right here. We've got to name it player. We've got to attach a sprite to it, right? Okay, so a sprite, and a collider. And you can see where I'm going with this, right? This is a huge pain. We don't want to have to do that. So Godot has a system built in place for creating scenes from existing kind of objects right here, or node structures. So we can see that our world scene is made up of multiple different nodes inside of it, right? And if you go down a layer, our player scene is also made up of multiple different sprites inside of it right here. And so we want to be able to create a scene of our player that we can then re-instance in multiple different levels. And this is really easy to do. You can just right click on the player and we can do save branch as scene. Here we go. We'll do save branch as scene and we can save this wherever we want to. We're going to save this inside of our player folder and it will be called player.tscn. Save. And look at that. Okay. Now our player is a single node, or technically a scene in this case, inside of our world scene. And if we want to edit the sprite on our player or the collision box, there's now this little icon next to the player that looks like a little scene.
Czyli technicznie rzecz biorąc można po prostu zrobić tak, że tworzysz to oddzielnie i później po prostu podłączasz pod node'a. Czyli każdy element node'ów można zrobić oddzielnie i później po prostu to połączyć. I nie wiem, czy to nie byłoby prostsze technicznie rzecz biorąc.
Or one of those, I don't even know what those things are called, right? From plays or movies, the little thing that claps in front of the camera. It looks like one of those. And so we can click on that and that will open up our player scene. And you can see this scene, it opens up a new tab up here, just like our world tab. and we can edit all of the properties inside of this player scene. And if we go back to our other level right here, we can actually go into our file system and find our player and our player scene right here, player.tscn. We can drag and drop this inside of our level. Now, why is it doing that? Why does it show the player over there and then drop them right here? What's going on with that? Well, that is actually a really good question. And so what we'll do to fix that is we'll actually open up our player scene again. And you can see when we created our player as a scene, it actually created the player in the same position relative to the origin that it was inside of our world. And so what we actually want to do is come into our player kinematic body here, come into the transform, and you can see our position right here. And we want to reset this to 0, 0, 0. So that sticks our player right there in the center. We can then save. Save our scene, Control S, saved our player scene right here. And we can delete all these. I'm going to use Shift to select them all, delete them all. And now when we drag and drop our player into the scene, it should do it properly. And of course it's snapping a little bit because we have snap on, but other than that, it's lining up perfectly. So we can have multiple players and we can select these and delete them like that. And we'll get rid of that second level because that was just for the sake of example. If we come back into our world, you can see it moved the player up into the top right hand corner. And this is because when you make a change to the base scene here, it will update all of the children's scenes to be that way. However, if we move this instance scene that we've made back out here, it won't actually change the base scene. The base scene will stay the same. So now if we run the game, nothing is actually changed, right? Our game functionally works exactly how it did before. However, our project is now organized better than it was before, and that's
skrypty, gracz, starcie. O, zobacz. Czyli ujdzie.
Easier for us to manage as developers. So we're going to create a scene for our bush. Now this bush is just a sprite, so we don't actually need it. We're just going to delete it actually. And we'll come up here. I'll save our world scene. We'll come up here and we'll add the little plus button to create a new
sprawdzenie,
scene. We'll make this a static body 2D because we want our bushes to be able to be collided with. So we'll choose other node here, static body 2D, and we'll call
łapie.
collided with. So we'll choose other node here, static body 2D, and we'll call this bush. And we can come over here to our origin because that's where it's going to be created. And we'll add a sprite node to that. We'll we can search in our file system here for bush, and we'll drag the bush.png into our texture here and our texture property here on our sprite. So now we're going to add a collision shape.
Nie, na razie jeszcze nie, bo
to this
collision shape
bush, and we'll just do a collision shape 2D. And once again, I'm going to do a capsule shape, and we're going to
miałem trochę może nadzieję, że uda się zrobić, że mają może opcję na zrobienie tego w tym
rotate this capsule by negative.
O. Wiecznie zapominam, że można przecież obrócić.
90.
Nie, dlaczego robi negative?
And we'll shrink it down to something like that. And I'll move this down to about here. There we go. And that's a pretty good collision. That way our character should be able to come behind the bush up here a little bit. So the bush has, you know, if you imagine the perspective, this is about where the bush's shadow would cast on the ground, and that's the kind of space that it would take up in the world.
Okay.
So if you want the exact properties, you can use the position here, the rotation, and I'll click on the capsule shape.
Łatwo już nie, trochę nie mogę się doczekać, aż w końcu się ogarnę na tyle, żeby zacząć z własnymi projektami.
Here, and you can set the radius and height to be exactly, if you want to set up exactly like mine. Now we save this scene, our bush scene, and we'll save it under world. Save it here. And if we come back into our world, we can delete this random static body that we made. Don't need that, just delete it. And we'll instance our bush in here. We can just drag some bushes in here. Now, this is actually a good time to talk about why I like to use the world as a base, or the node 2D as a base for my world. There's some different reasons for why you'd want to do that. If you
List w krzakach. Nie ma opcji się wydostać. Nice. Co robi list w krzakach? No.
you use, because you can technically use
Uniu, o. It's
just a base node for your world here. So I'm going to do that.
Wait. Tak działa. To jest jak być powinno? Tak, jest git.
We'll say world 2 like this. So let's talk about the differences between these two real quick, because this is helpful to know. Why would you want to use one over the other? Here, that for world instance.
Dobra, i
here,
teraz
position here, radius, our book to be exene, and we'll save it under world. Save it here. And if we come back into our world, we can delete this random static body that we made. Don't need that, just delete it. And we'll instance our bush in here. We can just drag some bushes in here. Now, this is actually a good time to talk about why I like to use the world as a base, or the node 2D as a base for my world. There's some different reasons for why you would want to do that. If you use, because you can technically use just a base node for your world here. So I'm going to do that. We'll say world 2.
Nie będę tego powtarzał, bo chcę po
Like
prostu
this. So
zobaczyć,
let's
co
talk about
będzie
the
robił.
differences between these two real quick, because this is helpful to know. Why would you want to use one over the other? One benefit of using a node 2D, or drawback, you could see it as both, is that you can technically move the world node 2D around, and it moves everything attached to it. So you could technically, there might be a reason you would want to do that in a game, you know, like have everything shift for some reason. And so that's possible. You can't do that with a node, because it doesn't actually have a transform, as you can see over in the properties. Another thing is if we drag a bush into our world, it places it right there, right? However, if we're in world 2 here and we try and drag a bush in the scene, it always sticks it right at the center, and then we have to move it. Well, that one worked because it was a child of our bush. If we make it a child of the world, you can see every time we drag and drop one in, they get stuck up here. So that's a drawback as well. And so, in my opinion, using a node 2D, the benefits outweigh any potential issues. You could actually drag your world around, but then you can just set it back to 0, 0, and you're fine. Or you can even just lock it so that you never accidentally click on it, right? So yeah, that's kind of the differences between using a node 2D and a base node. And I've kind of discovered that along the way as I've been using Godot. So let's don't save this. We'll close out of our
Okay.
bush scene. We'll close out of our player scene.
No już pół odcinka przeleciało. Matko. Seriously, zaraz skończę. Na dzisiaj. Nie będę robił więcej jak 2 odcinków, bo to po prostu jest w pewnym sensie męczące psychicznie. Na zasadzie takiej, że no po prostu staram się przyswoić jak najwięcej wiedzy, więc to jest po prostu skupienie się jak gdybym lekcje próbował przyswajać.
And we'll save here. And I want to do another thing in this video. So we've learned about how to make a scene.
Co tutaj się... Aha. YouTube znowu mnie nie lubi. Ale cóż, to nie pierwszy i nie ostatni taki przypadek. Okej. Okay. Jeszcze zrobić to bitrate niby mam. Macie. Będzie teraz lepiej. Tak. Okej. Niby jest teraz dobrze. Czy będzie z tym dobrze, to się jeszcze okaże, tak, ale niby jest dobrze. Okay.
Right? And you can actually instance scenes inside of other scenes. So if we come to our player here, click on our player scene, we can actually instance our bush inside of our player scene. Right? We wouldn't want to do that. But if we do that and save, then we're going to have a bush following our player around. And it will be, you know, a child of the player scene. It will try and move with it. And that's kind of weird.
To mogłoby być dobre, kiedy używasz chowańców, czy czegoś takiego, kiedy chcesz dodać coś takiego.
But
albo turet
you can do
poruszający
that.
się za
And
tobą.
why would that be useful? Well, let's say you have a city scene, right? And in that city, you have different houses. And in each house, you have chairs and tables and people, right? All of those can be scenes instanced inside of other scenes. And it's a little bit hard to grasp at first for beginners. This is one of the hardest things that I've noticed for beginners to understand about
może nie
Godot.
jestem
But that
początkującym.
system is extremely powerful because you're organizing your game by these different scenes, and you can make each scene work on its own, so it doesn't have to be, so it's not connected to any other scenes. It can be independent of anything else. And that makes your project much easier to manage because if you need to edit the player scene, you just click on the player and you manage everything inside of the player. You don't have to worry about a lot of code outside of the player, right? It's all kind of isolated, each organized into its own little compartment. And so this is a very, very powerful system. And once you get used to it, it will change the way that you make games. And so that's scenes for you. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in this video, because I considered doing this in 2 videos, but let's just do it in one because this is a shorter video. Let's talk about why sort.
Okay.
If we play right here, and we move our character around in this room, you can see the depth doesn't work when we're down here. The player is behind these bushes, and probably, but like the player's always behind the bushes. So the collisions are working properly how we want them to, but the depth ordering isn't. So there's a node that you can use for that. And for now, we'll just set our world node to be this. We may end up changing this later, but if we right-click on our world node, you can do change type. And we can set the type here to ysort. Now a ysort node, what it does is any any node that is a child of it, it will sort the depth of those nodes by their y position. So on the vertical axis. And so that is really powerful because then we can easily sort. We can come behind here and in front here, right? You can see it's automatically doing all that sorting for us. Now there is a problem. There's one more problem here, and we'll see if I can. I can't actually trigger it. But the problem is that it sorts them based on the center of the scene. So if we open up our bush on our player, so where's the center of the player scene? Well, it's right here on the player's neck. It's actually sorting the player right here at this point. But that's not where we want the player to be sorted. A better spot to be sorted would actually be right down here at the player's feet. So in order to do that, we're going to select our sprite and our collision shape by holding shift to select them both and move them, and move them both up. That just moved the player. Oh, it's because we have this on still. Remember earlier when we made it so the children weren't selectable? Well, let's check that. We don't need to worry about that anymore. So clicking on it undoes that. Now we can select the sprite and the collision shape.
Nie może tego wyrównać.
Up to, let's turn off snap so we can get single pixels. And move them up to about, I don't know, maybe we'll do here. That seems pretty good. And so what position is that? The sprite.
Teraz tak. O, no.
Transform is 0, -9. The collision shape transform. Here's the capsule size. Let's just set that to 4. 4. And 4. And the transform is, why, that is the weirdest transform. We're going to set the x to 0 and the y to 0 as well. 0, 0. There we go. So you can have it set up exactly like this. And now it will sort it based on this point. So if we have a bush.
Oops.
That is sorted based on its own point. So we're going to do this with our bush too. We'll select the sprite and the collision shape, move them both up until it's here. And once again, here are the transforms if you want to copy those exactly. -4 and 0 for the collision shape. And so that means our bush will be sorted at this point. It's important because if your sorting isn't working properly, if it technically is sorting, but then it does weird stuff where like it sorts properly and
To nie lepiej by było po prostu zrobić tutaj jeszcze tak, y sort, zrobić, żeby ci wszyscy po prostu byli tak, a to zostawić jako node 2D. I problem rozwiązany, można zachować obie właściwości.
Unless you get past a certain distance, then then you need to make sure that you've set these up like this. And I actually want to show you. I'm going to do an extreme reverse example. So we'll sort the player by the head. Clear up there, right? So this will technically work still, but you can see how it sorts properly until we get to here. That's because it's using the sorting position of the bush and the sorting position of the player, right? You can see, imagine there's a little dot here for the bush. In fact, let me show this. It's always better to show it. So we'll take a little screenshot here. paint.net, come into paint.net.
No, nie potrzebuję.
And paste this.
Ja to rozumiem akurat.
Imagine you've got your point here for the bush, right here, and your point here at the head of the player, right? At first, that's why it works properly. Switches, it's so that you have your origin set up properly. This is where we want to sort the player at, right? Kind of like at the center. If you imagine a pole going down through the player right here to the ground, right in the center, that's about where we want it to sort. But I think the YSort node is very cool, very powerful, really easy to set up, and then we automatically have Y sorting. We can come into our debugger, turn off visible collision shapes, run the game again, and this just looks really nice. Looks really good. So thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something from it. And if you did, be sure to give it a like. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. This video, the sponsor for this video is actually my Kickstarter backers who were able to fund my 1-Bit Godot course, and this series being part of that course, so I'm able to post it here on YouTube for free. And I really appreciate them and their support. If you're interested in that course, check it out, and I will talk.
Dobra. No to będzie tyle na dzisiaj. Dosłownie 2 lekcje, standardowo. Nie więcej, nie mniej. 2 tutoriale. To, co dzisiaj poruszał, to nie było mega skomplikowane. Znaczy, dobra, ta część z Velocity mnie trochę... Będę musiał chwilę posiedzieć to poanalizować, żeby mieć pewność, że dobrze wszystko rozumiem. Przesłuchać jeszcze raz i sprawdzić, czy dobrze zrozumiałem. Ale no ta część zostaje mi w głowie do sprawdzenia. I cóż. Aha, nie załapało mi odtwarzania. Nie no, załapało, tylko że też się zwiesiło. Dobra. Nie. Akurat dzisiejsze tutoriale, dzisiejsze 2 odcinki były bardzo proste. Ale to też dobrze. Czasami takie lżejsze tematy do omówienia też są dobre. To dzięki temu będę mniej się przejmował tym, że mam jeszcze do ogarnięcia te poprzednie materiały do obejrzenia. To jestem na 4. materiale z 23. Dobra, jeszcze kilka ładnych dni potrwa, zanim ogarnę ten tutorial. Ale coraz więcej łapię i myślę, że już mógłbym zacząć powoli siadać i tworzyć niektóre elementy do swojej gry. Ale jeszcze z tym poczekam. Ale istnieje opcja, że któregoś dnia zbiorę się, żeby nawet zanim jeszcze skończę całą tą serię tutoriali, żeby właśnie żeby już zacząć robić pewne elementy co do swojego projektu. Dobra, tak czy inaczej, wielkie dzięki, że zamóżcie dzisiaj wpadł. Trzymajcie się i zrobię wszystko, co w mojej mocy, żeby było... No cóż, do jutra. Nara. Dzięki. Szybko poszło. Nie spodziewałem się. Czekaj, nie, chwila. Rodzina ledwie. Ledwie ponad rodzinę tutaj siedzę. Czasami trzeba trochę tej. Jeszcze raz. Nara. Dzięki. Może od